Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Gail Kauranen Jones, known as Coach Gail Jones, is a nationally recognized worthiness expert, an intuitive executive and personal coach, and an inspiring teacher who has been leading clients through transformation for more than 25 years. She has trained more than 250 HeartMath coaches globally on her signature presentation, A Journey to the Heart of Worthiness. Gail has appeared as a guest worthiness coach nationally on CBS TV's Emmy Award-winning talk show, The Doctors. She's been on Sirius XM Radio with celebrity host Larry Flick, and in Maria Shriver's Sunday paper. She also has written for Arianna Huffington's Thrive Global and The Wellness Universe. She is a recipient of Brain Magazine's prestigious CREA Global Award, given to creative entrepreneurs making a difference in the field of mental health, for her articles on worthiness and self-esteem. Gail is currently working on her third book, extending her worthiness platform to teens and young adults. Her other two books are Cancer as a Love Story, Developing the Mindset for Living, and the book To Hell and Back, Healing Your Way Through Transition. Because you've got multiple books, instead of targeting a book, I'm just going to ask the opening question of, can you tell me a little bit about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it? And then you can take us wherever you'd like. You can put as much or as little of your own history in and the nitty-gritty and
Okay, great. So I've been a coach, executive and personal coach for 23 years. In 2012, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I did an alternative route in combination with conventional medicine. I did have the tumor removed, but I did not do the radiation or tamoxifen or any drugs. And in my alternative path, about a couple of weeks after I started writing my book, Cancer as a Love Story, Developing the Mindset for Living, I had moved to Arizona. I'm originally from Boston. And I started training with Dr. Joe Dispenza, a neuroscientist, on training your mind to heal your body. And then I came across three different healers. One was a naturopath doctor, one was a shaman, and one was an energy healer. And within a couple weeks of each other, each of them told me that claiming your worthiness to live can extend your longevity. And then a lot of us have a subconscious death wish when something happens in our life. It could be cancer, it could be financial crisis, it could be divorce. But they had a lot of examples of when they had their clients say, they'd ask them, do you want to be here? Claim, do you want to be here? That some of their tumors shrunk, some of them completely healed. And they had to push through a lot of resistance to claim that when they were in a trauma period of life. So I took a step back and I thought, if claiming your worthiness to live can extend your longevity, what else can it do? So I took a deep dive into my own journey and realized, boy, I don't feel very worthy. Externally, I looked very successful. I was editor of the award-winning news magazine in college. I was a journalist. I was a high-tech PR exec before I became a coach. Externally, it looked good. And I was coaching on Boston radio on a public affairs program every Sunday morning. But internally was a very scared, frightened little girl. And what I can say about that is, I had a schizophrenic mom. And what I learned about that journey is I was always overcompensating. And I see that a lot in my clients as well, that externally they look very successful, but internally they're very scared. So I had to heal a lot of that. And also, Dr. Gabor Mate, who's done a lot of work on trauma, says he can tell who's going to get cancer based on their childhood. And I remember when I was first diagnosed, it didn't matter what the doctors were telling me. I knew that I had been on fight or flight my whole life and that my body just crashed. There were extenuating circumstances on top of that. Something that's not often taught is that, or it just shared, and it was in my journey, my second opinion breast surgeon and another healer in Boston told me they were seeing a growing trend that the 3 years before a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer typically is off the chart stressful years. And it certainly was the case for me. I was gone through a divorce. I was assigned legal guardianship of my schizophrenic mom. I had 2 teenagers, and it was a recession. So I lost a lot of money. So I had every stressor you could have. But what I tell people now on healing from cancer, and I'll get into the worthiness piece further, is that whether you do an alternative path like I did, or you do chemo or radiation, and I've coached a lot of clients that do the conventional route, you have to deal with the stresses in your body. You have to heal the stresses in your body. You have to release them. So I use a tool called emotional freedom technique, an energy psychology tool to help release them. But going back to the worthiness piece, I dove deep in my own healing for 12 years and came up with this journey to the heart of worthiness. And what I learned very deeply, and I teach constantly, is that worthiness is an inside job. It has nothing to do with externals. We are all born worthy. And it's the first 7 years of life when that worthiness is further conditioned in or not conditioned in. So you can take all the classes in the world, including mine. You can read all the books. But my experience of healing my own worthiness and helping my clients heal theirs is you have to be seen, heard, validated, and acknowledged. So the witnessing is so key to ingraining a strong sense of worthiness. And I know even when I coach executive clients, we now know that 82%, the American Psychological Association says about 82% of people have imposter syndrome. So you're going along in your career, you get this huge promotion, and then you don't think you're worthy of it. You don't think you're enough. You're scared. You think you're a fraud. And often when I coach clients on that, a lot of them are PhDs, very well established, very well trained, but they were never seen, heard, validated, and acknowledged for who they are, not what they do. And that is the key to worthiness. And I tell my parents, the parents that I coach, please make sure you see, hear, validate, and acknowledge your kids for who they are, not just what they do. And I know right now we have a mental health crisis in the country, and I don't like to give a lot of attention to it for the teens. It's getting a lot of attention now because of Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation, where he has some shocking statistics about what social media has done to teens, preteens, and teens and young adults. He actually says it's creating mental illness. And some of that, he's a social scientist. It's all data-based. But I will just say that that's maybe part of it. But if those first 7 years, you don't feel worthy and you're carrying that underneath subconscious, that's another element. So it didn't just start with social media. I think it started a lot earlier, and social media just made the problem worse. So in my worthiness platform and seeing all the success I've had with adults, I started bringing my program to younger people. Some of the parents I coached would send their college students to me during the pandemic. And I realized, well, if we're helping clients rewire, I actually think I help them rewire their brain based on my training in neuroscience. But why aren't we giving this to youth right away? So when they start their lives, they make better choices based on knowing they're worthy. They make better career choices. They choose better partners.
Well, in other words, they're wiring their brain more productively and lovingly and correctly, so it doesn't have to be rewired later from a negative self-loathing perspective.
You said that beautifully. Thank you. I love how you said that. Yes. And what's interesting is, the neuroscientists, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Carolyn Leaf, and others say it can take between 45 and 63 days to change one of these subconscious limiting beliefs, such as worthiness, not enough, don't matter, not lovable. I think it could take longer or shorter, depending on your age. When I've coached the 18-year-olds, they get it pretty quickly. Also, if someone's had trauma in their life, and I know you've done a lot of work with PTSD and clients with trauma, it's going to take longer. They have other issues besides just not getting the right conditioning the first 7 years of life. So the interesting thing about instilling a stronger sense of worthiness is, in some ways it's simple, but people don't want to do it because it's boring. So it's repetitive. It's saying the new belief, I allow myself to know I'm worthy. over and over again. And I do a couple of things. One is, I know there's a lot of, and I don't know if you use it in your work, Dr. Tim, but a lot of people use affirmations, which I think are great, but I don't like them right away, because if you're creating a new neural pathway in the brain and you say, I am worthy, and you don't feel it, you're going to resist it. So I use allowing statements. I allow myself to know I'm worthy. I allow myself to know I'm lovable. I allow myself to know I matter. So it gives time for the new neural pathway. It's a bridge to the new neural pathway forming. And it also allows the whole universe to support you. Like, I remember when my first book came out in 2004, I didn't know what I was doing, even though I had been a journalist, but I had never written a book or tried to promote it. And if I said I am a best-selling author, automatically I met with resistance. When I say I allow myself to be a best-selling author, again, I allow the bridge to form. And also I allow the whole universe to support me. It's not my will. It's not putting the stake in the ground. I got this. Because the universe often has a bigger plan for us than we ourselves know. So I find allowing statements extremely important. So what I tell my clients is the first 5 minutes in the morning and the 5 minutes before you go to bed at night are the most important time of your day to do this rewiring. You start in the morning with a clean slate. And when you go to bed at night, what you say is what goes, it's like downloading the software into the brain, and that's going to stay with you. So saying I allow myself to know I'm worthy, first thing in the morning, and then before you go to bed at night. And the other thing I share is when my kids were little, and this was before I was even a coach, but I learned it somewhere, but I love it, and I share with other people now. I would, read them a book, tuck them in, and then I would ask them, what was the best part of your day? So that's what went in their brain. They could come home from school and have been upset, didn't make the team, something bad happened. But when they went to bed at night, it was, what was the best part of your day? And I have two very optimistic millennials, and, they've been through challenging times in the world too. But I think a lot of that impacted them, learning that. The other thing about worthiness, besides just repeating it, is tracking evidence of it. So when you allow yourself to know you're worthy, when you track daily, what's evidence of it? Am I dating a higher quality person? Am I making more money or able to ask for what I'm worth? Am I living in the environment I want to live in? Just tracking evidence of that teaches the brain to look for more of that. Another thing is when we're rewiring the brain or expanding our sense of self and worth, what would my life look like if I knew I was worthy? I have a guided meditation on the homepage of my website that people can listen to get them dreaming again. But often we're living our lives based on what was handed to us or based on past conditioning. But if I knew I was worthy, what would it really look like? And start dreaming. And with kids, I'm also do a lot on creating high self-esteem kids. And not only just dreaming what would my life look like if I knew I was worthy, but what contribution do I want to make? It's not just putting on a vision board, the fancy car, the big house, or whatever. It's like, how do you want to live in the greatest version of yourself in contribution to this world? So that's very different. So those are some of the tips on instilling worthiness.
Well, I have to echo your point about meeting resistance to affirmations, because years and years ago now, when I first started learning the EFT tapping,
right,
the emotional freedom technique, I would get a lot of pushback from people, either in my individual sessions or in classes I would teach of it, when the original statement is, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And people would say, that's a lie. I don't believe that. I'm not even going to say that. And sometimes they'd have a visceral response pushing back against saying that. So people that worked with me learned we needed to start backpedaling it, and sometimes a step, sometimes 2 or 3 steps away from it. So people would be more comfortable saying, I'd like to learn to love and accept myself.
Yes.
Or I'm going to pretend I'll be able to learn to love and accept myself. These days, a lot will have people say, even though I have this problem, I'm going to pretend it can get better, even though I don't know how. And so they're easing into that softening of the deep resistance that's built from this negative belief they're holding on to that's been programmed into them, as you were talking about. So it's a really good thing to understand that if I can stir up that negative stuff to where it starts to show up consciously, now I can deal with it. But if it stays hidden in that unconscious level, I just feel this resistance to the positive, and I don't know why.
Right. I love how you phrase that. I love those statements. Those are beautiful. How you get that, how you do the softening process.
It just grew out of working with people. We'd say, well, if you can't say that, what can you say? And these different things people would throw out. Some of them work for some people, some of them work for others. And that's why I really appreciate that, the flexibility of the EFT tapping tool as, basically I just say to people, it's a way to give yourself an acupressure treatment for whatever bothers you physically, mentally, or emotionally. And all right. And so then you can craft it to whatever the individual needs in that moment.
Mm-hmm. I like how you said that too, because a lot of people will take EFT and just download a script off of Google or whatever. And I think you and I both know that EFT works best when the statements are specific. Whatever I'm coaching a client at 11 o'clock, the client at 1 o'clock isn't going to hear those same statements.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, in neuroscience, one of the simplest ways of saying the rewiring piece is a clear intention plus an elevated emotion is how we create anew. And first of all, it can take a while to get a clear intention. Like when I do my own vision board based on neuroscience, I may take 4 months to create it, to get really clear of what I want in my life on all levels. And then the elevated emotion, when you're in a transition or you're going through a challenging time, you don't know what the elevated emotions are. You just know that you're feeling angst and uncomfortable. So when I do EFT, I'll help them clear the limiting, the negative, which, as you and I know, we have to bring to the surface. But then I'll tap in, empowering new words like, I allow myself to know I'm worthy, or I allow myself to feel more joy or more happiness or more awe or more wonder, words that they might not even have in front of them right now. So I think I spend as much time instilling the positive as I do releasing the negative.
Well, and that, brings to mind the idea that so many people I deal with when they're sitting in a session and I'll say, I notice a change, or you seem to be welling up with emotion. What are you feeling right now? And they look at me like I'm from Mars. And as we talk about it, some grown, intelligent adults have no idea what that phrase means. Well, I'm feeling you should get on with the session. Well, I'm feeling your last question was, and these are all thoughts, right? They're not actually in an embodied state where they can have words for it and describe it.
Right.
To me, they can't describe it to me if they aren't aware of it themselves. And so many of us haven't been raised by people who coached us into having the words to match with the physical sensations that arise during a period of time when something we don't like is happening, right? That whole constellation of things, if we haven't been trained into it, we don't learn it. We aren't born knowing the words for these emotional states.
Right. So I'm glad you brought that up too, because another part I believe in instilling worthiness is doing the inner child work. So one of the things I teach, and this is met with a lot of resistance at the beginning, especially with some of my executive clients. They don't want to talk about the inner child. Why you're bringing this in? So I've learned not to bring it in for a while till they've really, really trust me. But you have a relationship with that inner child. We have a girl and a boy within each of us, and you have that relationship for the rest of your life. And so you can believe externally that you're worthy, but if that child didn't feel seen, heard, validated, acknowledged, you have to reparent that child your whole life. And I'll just give you an example. So when I was coming out with my worthiness platform, I was the first coach, I believe, on national TV to introduce the worthiness piece. And this was in 2020 as a platform. And I was on a CBS show at the time, which The Doctors. It was an Emmy award-winning TV talk show, but it has since gone off the air. But I was the first person coming on. I had studied deeply about my worthiness platform. I had taught it. I'd used it on my own life and people I knew, shared it with them. So I felt confident in my message, but I had to reassure my inner child, my little girl, that it was going to be safe. Because in order to really share the authenticity of how I came to my passion and mission for this, I had to share that I had a schizophrenic mom. And I never talked about that publicly. I didn't talk about it anywhere. And I was risking that family members wouldn't talk to me again, because when I was growing up, mental illness wasn't talked about. You just wasn't talked about. Nobody acknowledged that I even had a schizophrenic mom. None of the family members. It was just not discussed. And I knew it was important because, how did I not get worthiness? And it goes back to those first 7 years. And, my mom was voted most likely to succeed. She was a brilliant woman. It's tragic. But I didn't get that nurturance. I didn't get that sense of safety. So I was always winging it. So I had to really spend time with my little girl and tell her, I'm going to be here for you no matter what happens on that TV show. I'm going to cheer you on. You're safe with me. And that was as much part of prep for the show as the script, getting the hair done, all of that. So I really encourage clients to even, when I look at some very successful people that I coached that have a lack of worthiness, or that they're so driven, which used to be me, that what is driving you? What is the unmet need you didn't get as a child? And so when I help them identify that unmet need, then they have something to work with in reparenting themselves. So I think you can have the neuroscience piece, the clear intention plus the elevated emotion. You can have the allowing statements, which is really important. Can you really do them every day for 45 to 63 days, tracking the evidence? But you have a relationship with your inner child for the rest of your life. And it might even be like, what does she need today? Or what does he need today? That child might need a nap. That child might need quiet. That child often, these days, that child needs play. I think a lot of us adults have forgot to play. So when you ask the child what it needs and you sit in quiet, it will tell you. So that's a really important piece that I integrate to the worthiness.
Yeah, excellent. Over the years of doing this work, there are different ways to look at what you're calling, the inner child piece. And it's important, as we talked about before with the EFT tapping, to make it individualized, to find a way to talk about it that whoever I'm working with can resonate with. So some people like the parts work from the internal family systems work with Richard Schwartz. Some people like the inner child work. Some people have to stay away from all the jargon and just get conditioned into their ability, to build the ability to know what they're feeling at different levels, and then just give that feeling a voice. But it's all the same work, right? I have to have this congruence from whatever the unconscious part of me is with the conscious part in order to move forward effectively. Otherwise, it's like, driving with a couple flat tires. It's just not going smoothly.
Right. I love that, how you just described the congruence there. The other thing I would just say too, and, I'm a different type of coach because I think it's a lot. I mean, I have all these certifications and trainings, but it's extremely intuitive. When you've lived through a lot and you've spent 40 years healing your own childhood, you have a lot of inner wisdom from different modalities that you've integrated and learned. So I think it's, that intuition is really important to honor it. But I think that the real difference is that, and I've worked with other coaches, and everybody has a different style. My style might not be for everybody either, but I really believe love and compassion is what heals. So every time I see a client, I always see them in the highest version of themselves, no matter what they're coming to me with. And that builds trust. And I really do honor them with love and compassion every step of the way. So whether they're dealing with something difficult, whether they're dealing with success, you probably know this, Dr. Tim, as well. Like when you become very successful, that's really painful too. If you read the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, Gay or Guy Hendricks, I forget which one it is.
Gay.
When you elevate, people are going to go away. And so we know that saying, it's lonely at the top. It really is lonely at the top when you first start elevating. because people subconsciously around you are threatened by that. So you have to really, again, reparent yourself, be your best friend, give yourself the love and compassion. And I think that also ties into the imposter syndrome. The 82% of people that have imposter syndrome, they have those anxious feelings when they get promoted. And I'm curious what you think about imposter syndrome.
Well, it's very, it's pervasive. And I don't personally know anybody who hasn't achieved anything above average in their work who doesn't have that experience, either actively or in their past.
Right.
It probably comes up in conversation a couple times a week.
Really?
Whether it's in my personal life or in my caseload of people. And so one of the things that I like in the clarification that's happening when you first started talking about it, that we have to have this validation and support and nurturance. And a lot of people start to believe, well, if I didn't have that when I was living my life in my first 7 years, now I have to go get it from somewhere outside of me. And my experience has been the opposite is true. If I didn't get it in my first 7 years, I have to give it to my younger self. I have to do the internal work, because it doesn't matter how many people I surround myself with that tell me that I'm brilliant, handsome, and funny, and sexy, and charming, and creative. My inner belief system, you might call it the inner child, you might call it a part of yourself, you might call it a core set of beliefs. They can't hear that stuff coming from the outside. There's a direct line from my thoughts and words to them, and from their thoughts and words to my receptive center, but nothing from the outside gets in.
Right. I love how you described that they can't hear it. So it's like, because they can't hear it, it's like this hole, right? You're always looking to fill it. But even if you can't hear it when it's trying to be filled. So you do have to give it to yourself to hear it. And, sometimes that kind of work is a lot of dark nights of the soul too, looking at, grieving what you didn't get. And again, we're not here to beat up any parents or anything like that. They didn't get it either. But grieving that you lost that you didn't get that, like it's
grief work is a part.
Grieve it. Pardon me?
Grief work is a part, absolutely, for most of the people I work with at some level. Right. And this other aspect of it is, you mentioned The Dark Night of the Soul. One of my favorite books is The Way of Mastery. And it says, hey, really, it's the dark night of the ego and the awakening of the soul, or the awakening of the awareness of the soul.
I love that.
Richard Schwartz talks about your core self.
Right.
And has these 8 words that begin with the letter C to represent the core self. So you can know when you're coming, or a thought or a reaction you have is coming from your true core self. If it's creative, if it's connected, if it's calm, if it's centered, compassionate. If it's anything else, it's a false wounded part. It's a false thought of belief systems. And so his work resonates with a lot of people that I work with, simply because he recognized, I don't have to go get this from outside me. I've got this core self. I may benefit from some coaching about how to tap into that core self and how to use it to dismantle these false negative beliefs. And yet it all has to be an inside job.
Absolutely. And we're not taught that. We're taught, our education system, everything teaches us to look externally. So to go inward and some people feel like it feels self-centered, but I love this, and it's not my quote. I wish I knew who said it, but being centered in the self is not the same as being self-centered. And actually being centered in the self is the greatest gift we can give somebody else, because we're owning responsibility for our own behavior, our own wounding, and you come to that level of presence with somebody else. That's a real gift.
Well, and, we have a lot of people that we work with that are parents or they're heads of teams, and they wonder how they can teach this to somebody else. And really the way we teach, 80% of whatever anybody learns from me, whether it's my kids or somebody else, is going to come by how I live my life. They're going to be modeling, right, whatever I've demonstrated. So if I want to give it to somebody else, I have to have it first. I have to create that pattern within myself.
Right. Right. And it takes discipline, to rewire yourself and repattern and reparent. But I just want to share one other thing too. So I later got certified in high self-esteem for parents, educators, and kids. And one of the things that really surprised me, and it might not based on your training, but I was never taught this. I wasn't taught it as a coach. I certainly wasn't taught it growing up. But the low self-esteem states are fear, anger, and sadness. And we usually have a predominant one. And I would suggest during the pandemic, we had all of them for many of us. But knowing which is your low self-esteem state that you go to, so that when you're in it, and I always share with my client, it's really important to feel your feelings. I will never tell a client to squelch their feelings ever, like they're gold, right? And sometimes they're feeling them for the first time when they come to coaching. So it's really important that they're witnessed, like I said, again, seen, heard, validated, acknowledged. But the high self-esteem states will really surprised me, because I think when people think of high self-esteem, they might think of Tony Robbins on a stage, or, Taylor Swift performing, or, you see it as performance-based. But actually, high self-esteem is gratitude, forgiveness, and empathy. Now, that just threw me way off from what I learned or what I perceived as high self-esteem. So when you're in a low self-esteem state and you want to get out of it after you've taken time to feel those feelings, you can choose which of those high self-esteem states are you going to go to. Who can you have empathy for? Who can you forgive? And often that could be yourself. And gratitude. Gratitude is one of the greatest ways to manifest anew. My morning routine is, I meditate every morning, and then I don't get out of bed until I write down 10 things I'm grateful for. And it can be something as simple as my green tea and shake, or looking at the clouds, a beautiful day, coming on this podcast, making a new connection. It doesn't have to be anything big, or, somebody that helped me yesterday, or I helped. So that's really, and so again, those first 5 minutes in the morning, if you can get up and you go to your to-do list, all of a sudden you lose that precious space to claim your worthiness and to be grateful for something, which can rewire you for the whole day. And the other morning thing that I think is important is, again, these take discipline, but you can get into this practice, so it just builds every day. But start your day with doing something that brings you joy. If you wait till the end of the day, you might not get to it. So I've actually created my schedule. So I walk in the morning. Often I see clients early evening anyways, because they're working all day. But that brings me great joy to be in nature. There's not hardly a day that goes by that I'm not in nature. So what brings you joy? And if you create a joy list and start doing something on your joy list, it can, that again, you're showing yourself that you are worthy of having joy in your life.
Well, I would echo everything you just said. And it brings to mind the old statement. I've heard it for a lot of years. I can't find a way to be grateful for everything that happens in my life. There's always going to be something that I don't really want, or that's a struggle to accommodate. And yet I can always find something to be grateful for. So this practice of gratitude is something that even if I'm in great pain, I can be grateful for the fact that I'm still breathing, that I still have awareness, that I'm living in a place where there's, whatever level of medical care is available to me. And practicing that, as you've talked about from the beginning of our call today, is a way to train the brain into that certain pattern. The old adage, neurons that fire together wire together. And there's all the wonderful research that's been coming out since the 90s about memory reconsolidation, which is the idea that, all the way through my most of my graduate school training and certainly all my undergrad training, we were taught that when you have an event happen and you log memories about it, it's there forever. It's wired and it's not going to change, and the brain doesn't change that way. And there was literally, a whole movement to say one part of the brain is responsible for a specific level of function, which goes against the idea of neuroplasticity, which goes against the idea that our brains are changing and growing. And it's only been the past 20 years or so that it's been widely acknowledged without going against the flow. I mean, people tried to do it, but they got shouted down and their papers weren't published before that. But the idea that we can practice and build new patterns of thought, new beliefs, we can undo the old negative conditioning,
right,
is a relatively new concept.
right.
And the ways to do it are still developing. People are coming up with good, new and better ways, some are more efficient. But the idea of memory reconsolidation and the ability to access a negative memory and the trauma energies associated with it and create that window of 4 to 5 hours during which period of time I can rewrite that set of associations, it's powerful.
Right.
And it's not just the same as repeating affirmations. It's taking into account everything you're talking about, recognizing, I might have a lot of pushback. And if I have a pushback, I have to address that. I have to find a way to see that what's negative in me is false.
Right. I love that. I love that line. What's negative in me is false. So I'm curious, Dr. Tim, if you would just share with me. So I know you do a lot of work with PTSD. So when you're coaching somebody through PTSD, is there anything specific you share with them to reclaim their worthiness after the trauma or through the trauma? And I bring this up because I'm working on a book now, bringing my worthiness platform to teens and young adults, and I'm interviewing 50 to 100 of them. But one of the beautiful young woman, 19, who's in, I don't share her name in the book, I'm not going to share it here either, but she was sharing the impact of the pandemic and social media. And when she was 15 to 17, she was on social media looking great with this relationship with this guy. And I guess it's a big thing that they all compare, the relationship. So her boyfriend would go see what another guy was doing and do that with her, and they all look great. Well, behind closed doors, she was being sexually abused. And she shared this story because she really wanted to encourage other teens to get off of social media. But so she now has PTSD, and what she said to me was, and she was going to college to be a lawyer. Now she's going to be a therapist using her healing journey. But she said to me, she wished people would see her, like she's a classic violinist. She's a volunteer. She speaks French. She said she wished people would see her for the wholeness of who she is, not just as someone with PTSD, which she believes she's going to have the rest of her life. So I'm just curious what you would tell somebody as a worthiness piece in this issue.
Well, the first thing is I'd come right to the last thing you said, that I would encourage her to understand that someone with PTSD is not something she's going to have and be the rest of her life, that there are really good ways to move through. And we were just talking about one. It's called memory reconsolidation.
Yes.
And the memory reconsolidation is not a specific technique. It's the understanding of the way the brain functions and how a variety of different techniques, which include things like the EFT tapping. It includes things like the EMDR, the eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing work. It includes things like brain spotting. It includes just a host of other trauma resolution techniques, including the bioacoustical utilization device and the neuroemotional technique and others that can move people from this intense experience of having their post-traumatic stress symptoms being activated in them and driving a lot of what happens within their daily interactions multiple times a day. And they can be consciously aware of it as they're living their life, that here's this this under the conscious level turbulence they're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
to a place where it is just a memory for the most part. And they go through situations where they say, oh, this is interesting. I just went through this situation and that would have been impossible for me before. Or I would have had, to be fighting anxiety through that whole thing. But it's a memory. And that's the first thing I would say to somebody like that to help with the worthiness is this isn't, one of the people that rapid transformation therapy, there was in my estimation, a genius creative individual who created this kind of pattern for hypnosis. And unfortunately, I think you had to have his level of creativity and the way your mind works to do that, like Erickson with hypnosis. But some of the things I learned from that were so important. The idea of context, the idea of remembering that this thing happened, but it wasn't me that it happened to. There's a part of me that had this happen. So, like things like if people say, oh, he stuck that in me. Well, do you say that's what happens when a dentist works on you? Somebody put something in you? No, you say they put something in my mouth, right? They touch this part. And so you get this separation of a part of you from the core of you, this, as you used the word soul before, your essence. And you strengthen that awareness that even though these things have happened to your body or in events in the past, that's not who you are today.
Right.
And you start building that with people. That is one of the keys to reestablishing their awareness of their worthiness, which has never been diminished.
Right. I love that. And I love how you just give great hope. You started out right away that she's not going to have this the rest of her life, which she believes now because it's still pretty fresh in her healing. And that also brings me to another point. All the news right now about the mental health crisis for teens and young adults and the statistics. There are some therapists and other people that believe that the emphasis placed on this is creating more crisis. Like some kids that might just be depressed because their boyfriend broke up with them now think they have a severe depression because of all the attention on this crisis. So what I have found so far in interviewing, I'm interviewing kids 13 to 26. They are a lot more optimistic than it looks in the media. And I think we have to teach kids right now, and why I'm so glad to be on this podcast with you and your brilliance, is to have hope again. And the one message I give everybody, whether it's a CEO, whether it's a college student, is you are not your circumstances. And I love how you bring it back to the soul. Too much is placed on the circumstances. We're getting zapped every day, with the news, but that's not who we are. And when I talk to these kids and I'm interviewing them, and what's really amazing for the interview process is that they feel much better afterwards. And what I realize is it's just being seen, heard, validated, and not. I'm not trying to do it, but they are so happy to share their stories, and they really want to help other young adults and teens through some of the things they might have. When I interview the 26-year-old, they want to help somebody who's 13 see what they learned. But they are more optimistic than what's being portrayed from those I've interviewed. The one trend, the one common theme, and everybody has a different issue, or some are pretty happy, aren't dealing with trauma. There was one boy who was amazing. His dad committed suicide during the pandemic, and he's still healing. It's a deep grief, but he ended up changing his major from software engineering, which he was trained she should go for. Now he's working in a training at a trade school to work in a race car pit, changing the tires. That's his passion. That's his joy. He grew up loving go to car shows. Cars his thing. So the fact that he lost his dad, his best friend, at such a young age, made him realize the preciousness of life. Like he didn't want to wait for many years later to go after his dream. But the one thread that seems to be common that they're feeling right now from those I've interviewed is that they've lost their sense of being able to make a living. They all are very, very concerned about the economy. I interviewed one woman who has 3 degrees, 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree, and she doesn't think she's ever going to be able to own a home. So that seems to be a common thread. Like, we're not going to be able to do what you did. And I think it's really important we create hope in them again, because when they're talking to me and they share their stories, they are expressing their inner greatness. They know their greatness. They're not a statistic. That's the key message I want to get out for Mental Health Awareness Month. They are not a statistic. They are full human beings with a beautiful soul. They know how to express it, and we're not giving enough attention to that.
Well, and the thing that comes to mind as you're talking is the idea of these labels. And the media loves a label. It
Right.
loves, a syndrome. It loves a disorder. It loves a diagnosis.
Right.
And people aren't these labels.
Right.
And so, it goes back to the best people that I've been drawn to in this field for the past 50 years are people that don't want to live in the world of label and diagnosis and syndrome. They understand those, they'll study them, but they're looking at the people they're dealing with as a whole person in front of them. They're not treating the symptom, they're not treating the pattern or disorder, they're interacting with a person. And, it goes all the way back to Marshall Rosenberg with his nonviolent communication work, where he'd be invited into these hospitals where they're saying, well, go in and interview this person and tell us what you think their diagnosis is based on your nonviolent communication model. And he says, I don't do that. I'll go in and I'll try and find out what their needs are, what their hopes are, what their goals are. But I'm not going to go in and come back and tell you, here's a label.
Right. Right.
And that's one of the biggest things I think that our media promotes. I think it's kind of by default. I don't think there's anything nefarious about it. It's just what gets ratings, right?
Right. Right. And I think we really need to help them build hope again, the youth, and tap into their greatness. I just want to go back to those high self-esteem states again for a second. The gratitude, which we talked about, and the forgiveness and the empathy. One key thing to know about forgiveness that's really important, why it's important to find it for somebody else and yourself, besides, the obvious reasons. But even when you think of going back to the thread of it doesn't link to this, but the ability to make money and have be able to buy a home, if you hold a grievance, you block abundance. You block abundance. So it does have a material impact by holding a grievance. And so I know it's really courageous work. It's hard work to forgive somebody who's really hurt you. And again, sometimes it's hard to forgive ourselves, but it blocks many other things besides that relationship. So that's important to know. And the empathy piece, there is a lot of cruelty expressed in the world with the young people that they share, the bullying that happens in school. And I know it's a leap, but it is important to understand when somebody is being a bully and somebody is attacking someone else, it's because they have low self-esteem. They don't know they're worthy. So if you can have empathy, find empathy that they are in a lot of pain to be acting that way, it can take the pressure off of you and help just help the relationship a little better.
Well, and it's ancient wisdom that says, if we could but know the secret pain and suffering of our enemy, it would be enough to dismantle all hostility and aggression. Right. And Glennon Doyle has a podcast called We Can Do Hard Things. And one of the things they've done on it is write a letter from unconditional love, as worked with Elizabeth Gilbert. And yes. Glennon's letter that she eventually got to and wrote talks about forgiveness. And the key of that beautiful writing, which you can get a transcript of if you go to their websites, is that forgiveness is about perspective. And so if I could back up to this, 30,000-foot perspective and see the wounded history of the person that I'm calling the bully or the enemy, I would see all the suffering they had to go through to move from being a helpless infant when they were born to somebody who could do something harmful to somebody else. And that perspective is enough to dismantle what I'm using to generate my anger, my vengeance, my bitterness, which is what some people call forgiveness, right? And others would call it pardoning. Right. And so the idea of this perspective, the idea of recognizing that anger can't come out of a person unless there's pain, fear, or sadness in them.
Right.
That's me and that's everybody else. And so if I learn to understand that whatever comes out of the mouth of anybody else is always going to tell me more about them than it's ever going to tell me about me or anybody else around them.
Right.
Then I also understand that what comes out of me is the guide, is the compass, is the Geiger counter to my pain, fear, and sadness when it's negative.
I think too, one of the ways on a practical level, on a daily basis, it's something I practice, and I'm not always great at it, but I try. We're conditioned to be judging and critical. It's a way we guard ourselves, right? Sometimes. But if I meet somebody new and I focus on offering them love and acceptance, internally, I'm going to offer them love and acceptance. Even when somebody's being a little difficult, if I can just say love and acceptance, I'm always amazed what transforms versus judging and criticizing them for being that way. And, we are hardwired to judge and criticize, again, to keep ourselves safe. But, I know you're probably familiar with Dr. David Hawkins' work, the scales of consciousness. When I first was healing from breast cancer, I used to teach guided meditation circles based a little bit on Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, but also my goal was to help people get to 500 above. So for the listeners, Dr. David Hawkins has a scale of consciousness from 0 to 1,000. And those that are 500 or above, I think it's actually 540 or above, are in a love-based consciousness. Well, when I set the intention for those circles, those guided meditation circles for people to come in love, be in love, it was amazing some of the things that manifested. I mean, really amazing, amazing things being held in that love. And even when I was in the mind-body program for cancer at Mass General Hospital, which is affiliated with Harvard University. So it's a database program. We had to meditate 20 minutes a day, journal on it, and then they would, review our journals. But that data is that those are in a mind-body program versus a support group. You're not talking. We never even talked about cancer, except that when somebody was getting a treatment or had a surgery, we would send a pink blanket of love around that person at that time of their scheduled appointment. But one of the things they shared was that those are in a mind-body program. And I considered that like it was love-based. It was totally love-based. Can extend their longevity 2 to 2.5 times longer than the prognosis. And I wish data like that was shared more often, because when people understand that they can get into a love state, and when we do it collectively, it's so powerful. And I think that was the hard part about the pandemic, when people were so isolated. You lost that group dynamic, and we have Zoom and it's great, but it's still not the same as being in the energy of other people. I mean, I know you can raise the vibe on Zoom, but when you're in that energy in a circle, it's really beautiful.
Well, and I think one of the problems we have is that people will hear something like what you just said, and they'll be hearing it as an either or. So you have to either do the traditional, the allopathic medical model for treating your illness, whether it's cancer or whatever else, or you do a love-based thing. And they're not either or, right? These are nothing like mutually exclusive. The thing I wanted to mention is, to my eye and ear, how beautifully Pierre Pradervand works with this. His book, The Gentle Art of Blessing, and his other book, 365 Blessings to Heal Myself and the World, the Gentle Art of Blessing book is one of the more powerful books that I've ever encountered, as I've see it have ripple effects for different people that I work with in different groups. So I have to recommend that. And I realize that we're really stretching the time here. So I wonder if you could just get centered and take a breath and review what we've talked about so far and see if there's something you want to go back and highlight or something we haven't mentioned yet you want to get in before we wrap up.
I would just like to stress that we all have an innate greatness and to really focus on our soul work, our souls versus external circumstances. Do not give your power to externals. And from that greatness and from that connection to your soul, you will be led, you will be guided. And it's a different level of trust than we've been taught. And to commit to having an inner connection with yourself for the rest of your life is so important. There is so much wisdom in that connection. That's my key message I would like. And especially for the young people, there's a greatness and they know their greatness and stay tuned to that, stay in tune with that greatness.
Wonderful. Well, please mention again the 2 books that you've already published and the one that's in process.
Okay. My first book is called To Hell and Back, Healing Your Way Through Transition. It guides adults through four transitions, career change. For me, it was becoming a mother, caregiving, and coping with death. And then the second book is called Cancer as a Love Story, Developing the Mindset for Living. That's based on my journey healing from cancer and also my training with Dr. Joe Dispenza, teaches some neuroscience tips and tips from naturopath doctors. And but it's written like a journal. Like people tell me there's a lot of technical information in the sidebars, but it's a very easy read. And people have also told me that book has helped them even in retirement or another transition. You don't have to be going through cancer to learn how to develop a mindset for living and thriving. And the book I'm working on now, it's tentatively called, it's going to be changed, but it's just my focus, Building Worthy Teens and Young Adults.
Wonderful. And if people want to find you, is there a specific website you direct them to?
My website is called claimyourworthiness.com. And LinkedIn I'm on, it's under Gail Kauranen Jones, Kauranen Jones. And on Instagram and Facebook, it's at Coach Gail Jones.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. It's been delightful.
Thank you. Love the conversation. Very engaging. Thank you.
Gail Kauranen Jones, known as Coach Gail Jones, is a nationally recognized worthiness expert, an intuitive executive and personal coach, and an inspiring teacher who has been leading clients through transformation for more than 25 years. She has trained more than 250 HeartMath coaches globally on her signature presentation, A Journey to the Heart of Worthiness. Gail has appeared as a guest worthiness coach nationally on CBS TV's Emmy Award-winning talk show, The Doctors. She's been on Sirius XM Radio with celebrity host Larry Flick and in Maria Shriver's Sunday paper. She also has written for Arianna Huffington's Thrive Global and the Wellness Universe. She is a recipient of Brain Magazine's prestigious CREA Global Award, given to creative entrepreneurs making a difference in the field of mental health, for her articles on worthiness and self-esteem. Gail is currently working on her 3rd book, extending her worthiness platform to teens and young adults. Her other 2 books are Cancer as a Love Story, Developing the Mindset for Living, and the book To Hell and Back, Healing Your Way Through Transition.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.